Hello, this is Pete from GS2. Just kind of want to do a little quick setup on this instructional video that's coming forthwith. And this is a project that I had, again, I'm a novice builder for all practical concerns. I retired, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. Bought a couple kits, amplifier kits based on tubes. Again, I'm not going to get too far into it, but I found out that the sound quality was a little different than I expected. I didn't know why. I didn't know how the things worked, but I built a couple of Heath kits as a youngster in retirement. So I was told, fine, get a hobby, and I don't golf. I can't play hockey anymore, ball anymore. Too old for that. So I got into building some of these kits. And this is kind of a hybrid of one of the kits I built from an author who has taken some of the old Dynakit projects or builds or products back in the 50s, 60s and improved them. And I took this a little step further. I probably, as we're continuing on with our build of the monoblock amps, KT88 power tubes. I had actually done one of these chassis before, and I had realized after I kind of dressed it out that these are where the KT88s go, and they're a pretty large diameter tube. And I had actually had this cap. This is the can cap here. I had it kind of centered in the middle of this thing, and because of the diameter of the KT88s, I shifted it over a little bit. So it's kind of a minor change. Cosmetic, if any at all. It kind of looked funny sitting over here with these large tubes. So I just moved it over a little bit and modified my drawings a little bit to reflect that. And then I also went to a different choke that was sitting between the output transformer and the power transformer. Similar characteristics. I think I was using a 4 Henry. Anyway, I went to a different choke, and it has a smaller footprint. So, as ended up, the chassis that I had painted up and or was getting ready to paint, I had dressed it all out. I also had found out I had a little this block. These are my bias taps here and my bias pots, and I had them moved over a little bit. There was a small ridge of manufacturing where they bent over the aluminum for this chassis. You can kind of see it there in the corner, and I had put that pot too close to that, so I moved that over. So again, things that if you never do something, have never done it before, learning experience. So I dressed it all out, didn't think, oh, that's not too bad. I was just going to make one at that time. Went to put paint on it, had an incompatible primer to top coat, and the thing just crinkled up, and I didn't pick that up right away. So as it ended up, it's like, okay, I just scrapped that. I had one of these, an extra one of these anyway, so I figured, okay, just buy another bottom for it. And as it ended up redoing that, I'm gonna get the final holes in here. I got all my transformer feet mounts, and then these are where my grommets go. This is where the choke goes, and its grommet. So all in all, I'm gonna take another shot at this thing, and I think the only thing I've got left to do from a cutout standpoint is on the back here. I've got to cut out the IEC. And I also made a change here. I'm going to change where the rotation of my impedance selector switch, so I've got to put the tab up there. So that's a boo-boo. No one will see that in the bottom anyway. So at least I won't. Again, I'm building these things for me. I'm not building them to sell in the open market. This is just a project that I'm actually going to be replacing a couple of monoblocks that I have that feature 2 KT88s here. So this would give me like 60 watts. The combination 2 would give me 120, and there's just more amplifier than needs, so I was going to put them on the market and sell them. And so anyway, next segment, hopefully I'll get these things back out of paint without the paint coming off. And then I've already got the blackboard built for it. All my circuitry done. Most of my design work is done. Pretty much I'll be going into a build mode. So next segment, hopefully you'll see these in another color. I'm not sure exactly which color yet. I'll have to pick that out today. Just a quick small segment in here. I'm drilling out all my pre-punched holes for my power transformers and the grommets. I have a small tabletop drill press. It certainly makes it a lot easier than doing it with a hand drill, but whatever works best for you to do, this is how I'm doing this one. And we're continuing the build of this KT88 Monoblock amp. Got the chassis out of paint, put some primer on them, sand them, of course, clean them up with some rubbing alcohol. Got them painted, nothing special. Not sure as if I like the color I chose, but well, whatever. Anyway, front view of it. Got all my parts out of my parts box. This is build one. Just started to put the grommets in. I was updating my bill of materials, just making sure I got everything. There's always a couple surprises. I forgot to do this, I forgot to get that, or I thought I had these on the shelf, so I re-inventoried everything for both chassis and builds, and got pretty much everything. I just got to order some KT88s, which are, I'm not sure exactly who I'm gonna buy those from. I've got some gold lions on the shelf that I might use, the old Russian made stuff. I've got some, did buy a couple Pavane, or some people call them PS Vanes, KT80s that I bought. Not real sure if that's the long-term play on this, but anyway, I'm going to continue this build. I got my transformers ready to go. I'm just going to put everything together and let these things, I painted them. They've been dry for about, I don't know, 3-4 days now. The paint's kind of hard, so I'm not going to scar them up too much when I go to work on them. So probably next segment should have these things built up a little bit. Still got to build the second blackboard of the components, so got all the parts for those. Should be pretty straightforward once I start to put them all together, and then I'll spend some time doing the routing of how I'm going to run the wires and such, keep all the DC and AC apart, and make sure I don't run any high voltage next to low voltage, and the usual stuff you do for routing, which can make a big difference. So anyway, next segment we'll take this a little further. In this short segment, put all my transformers on there. I've got my output transformer here, which is a Hammond 1650 PA. I've got my choke here. It's a Hammond 193H. It's a 5 Henry. And you can't see it's upside down, but this is my power transformer here. It's a 375X Hammond. Again, I got them all mounted. Put the cap in here, which is a little bit easier to work with than mounting all these capacitors on the board. I got my two 8-pins sockets here, my two 9-pins over here. I'll pre-wire those sockets typically, so when I go to put them in there I don't have to spend too much time in tight quarters attaching wires. I've got my bias for V4, which is this one, V3 over here, my taps so I can get to it. Again, I'm of the mindset that I will roll tubes in and out of this thing to see which I like and which I don't like. Again, I change speakers, I change rooms. It's just a nice ability to have your bias settings in a convenient place. That's just a personal thing. On-off switch and pilot light. I've got a base set up for this thing already with some feet on it, so it'll be a little higher off the ground. And I'll show you what it looks like on the back side. This is the back side of the monoblock amp. Again, power, choke, output transformer. I'm using a selector here. I put these on guitars, amps when I build those on a binding post. That way I don't have 3 of these things sitting off in a row. It's it's a little easier to do. Again, I change speakers. I will do that, and it's so much easier to be able to hit a selector switch and get my impedance match. IEC connector for the mains fuse, and this is my isolated RCA connector for the input. This is unbalanced, of course. So that's what it looks like from the back side. I'll start working on getting my sockets pre-wired, the 8-pin and 9-pin, and install the blackboard in there and start to lace it up. Probably, and then I've got, this is the first build, I've got another one of these sitting over here, chassis ready to go, and I'll in time I'll get that on the table and we'll get her built. Continuing on with this monoblock KT88 build. Got most of this as I say, some of the infrastructure in here, how it's going to lay out. Put my V4 and V3, those are the two KT88 sockets, and I've still got to wire the 12 AU7s, ACC83s. Pretty much had to just figure out how I was going to do my wire routing with the AC and put a pilot light on and wire it all in there, and I got most of that done. The output transformer I've got wired into a impedance switch over here going to a binding post, which is convenient. I'll be able to do 4, 8, and 16 ohms on this one, the way this power amp, this output transformer worked. Got my 6 volt, 6.3 wires down here with the ground in the middle. So I pretty much got it going, and then I figured out once I get to a certain point, this board will fit somewhere, obviously on standoff somewhere around here. And that'll pretty much be the wrap of it. Then I'll have to do the same thing on another one. So I guess I'm debating on kind of breaking off and doing a little bit at a time. But that's pretty much how it's starting to look. So getting there, one step at a time. Let's see where we are now. This is the kind of the layout drawing that I derived from a schematic for this KT88 driven amplifier. And again, pretty straightforward. What I do is see if I can get my shadow out of here. I put everything on a blackboard. That's my that's how I do things, good, better, and different. And so what I wanted to show is I'll take that drawing that ends up making something like that with turrets and such, and I'll print it off to scale, and then I can just tape it to my blackboard, and then I can just go through and I'll use a prick punch. This is actually a tungsten welding rod, and I'll basically go through and I'll just tap, 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 and put a bunch of indentations there. Then I can actually drill it out to the particular size of the turret I'm using. And that, I found out, really makes life a lot easier. Instead of spending all the time trying to lay it out and, making mistakes on that. I do this with all my chassis and any kind of panel builds I have, where I can just print it out to scale, plot it out to scale. And, it really makes life easier. It cuts down the time. It certainly cuts down the mistakes. And then, when I'm all done, I can mount all the components on the board like this, and then eventually put that in the chassis and then wire it in. And that's kind of where I'm at in this particular project. There is one interesting thing I wanted to bring to light if I could, and I probably don't have a schematic here, but I'll cover that in the next section when I'll pull up a schematic, and how this particular designer handled the long tail plate follower, and he uses a current regulator. It's an LM334 if memory serves. So I'll bring that out in the next segment. We can kind of take a look at the actual design. It's not my design. I'm borrowing it from someone else, so I'm just building this for myself. So I'm not going to sell it to anybody, but I think maybe that's how a lot of people do it. So I found this design, I kind of cut it in half, and it seems to work. So we'll bring out the schematic in the next segment. Okay, we're back at the assembly of this KT88 amplifier here, and I got the blackboard in there, all components fitted, and I'm just lacing it into all my sockets. Power transformer up here, my V1, V2, those are 12 AU7s, these are KT88 8-pin sockets. Probably going to take me a couple days to get, as I'll take my time to try to, so I can kind of keep this nice and neat. But that's kind of where I am right now, and probably within a day or two I'll be able to plug it in to fire it up and check my voltages, put some tubes into it, and then throw a load resistor on the back side of it, check my bias. So I've got all that. I've still got quite a lot of work to wire into this thing, so this is the part that, so I'm building two of these things at the same time. So I'm taking one to a certain point and then I've got the other one on the shelf over here that I have yet to mount the board in, and I'll get to that one. Once I figured out where it was going to go, where it would make best sense, so I'll kind of do that and get it loaded in there, and then we'll see what happens from there. So more to follow. I've got my schematics all set up here so I can put it together, and the one I'm working on. And I think I mentioned in an earlier video that this particular author did a really unique thing here. And this is the inverter stage. It's kind of hard to see here. I'm going to try to come a little closer. This is This is my V2, so it's V2A and V2B, and he comes down here to this LM34, which is basically a current regulator. And so this, between these two stages here, between these two sides of the triode, that's where the inversion happens, you know, where they go out to the push-pull on the KT88s, and that's where that's happening here. I've seen that done with a plate follower. This one is really not a plate follower, but it is a long tail scenario where they're both tying into the same. Instead of this going down to a resistor capacitor or just a resistor down ground, he's going through this, and I've never seen this before, so I'm not taking any credit for doing it. I'm not going to sell this. This is just for me. I copied it off another design from Bob, and we'll see where it goes. So again, I've already got a couple of these amps in function that I bought from him as a kit. I think Bob is retired now, and then I converted over to a layout such that it's kind of very similar to what we see right in the build, you know, where I got my KT88 sockets over here. It's the bottom view, and then I'm only using one side of this V1, the triode. I'm lighting both elements. I'm not sure if I should do that or not, but that's what I'm doing. And it's you know, so far so good. It's coming along pretty smooth, but that's what he did there, and I've never seen that done anywhere before. I'm curious to see how it's going to turn out. Again, I've got two amps that I built as a kit for him, and that's what he did there. So I figured, well, and they work. They're very clean, very stable. They do not distort. And I just thought, well, maybe it might be a good thing to try. Okay, we got this amplifier connected up, and I got it upside down. I put a couple 1287s in there and a couple of KT88s that I had laying around. They're not going to be the finished product. They're kind of older tubes I could test with them. So I got the board in here, got everything, and this is still warm, so I'm not going to get real touchy-feely with this thing. I used a shielded cable over here to go to my BNC connector, unbalanced in the back. Pretty much got everything laced in. I tried to take all my grounds to a common tie where I tied off the main power transformer. That seems to work best sometimes. This one's got the impedance switch in back in here, 4, 8, and 16. And I'll go to a binding post back here, which, you know, I swap speakers out, so some people will never do that. They have one set of speakers they use. Revelations this morning, the circuitry for the bias, which looks like this here, comes off a 50 volt tap. The original author used a 55 volt tap. So one of the things I have to do with this is it's got the 50K bias pots here, which I stuck on the front panel, and then it's got this drop down resistor here. It's a 1K, and I'm coming in a lot hotter because instead of using tube rectification, I'm using diodes. So as I came back through and I remeasured, like over here, the author originally had 500 volts. I got 528, so I'm up. I knew that, and I'm pretty much up. Like in this one particular here, I think he called for 330. I got 370, so I knew I was going to be high. I just didn't know how high. Come to find over here on my plates, my KT88s, I got 518 and 518, which was nice to have it balanced. It's a little high, but it's not excessive. KT88 can take a little bit more than that. What I did find out is my bias circuit. This was a 1K resistor right there, and I was getting, I had the pots all the way turned down, and I was high. So I played around with values here, making this resistor less and less and less. I ended up finally putting in a 330 ohm resistor in there instead of a 1K. So I dropped it down by a third. It actually gave me some work that so I could move my knobs up from full left counterclockwise to get to about a half a volt, which is what I was looking for. I typically will take power tubes like these, and I'll bring them above a half a volt for the, and I've actually, because I can actually do the calculation here because I got the plate voltage. I didn't do it yet, but I like to bring those up a little bit, so it would be more of a, I guess they would call it a cold bias versus a hot bias. So it's a little, anyway, all that said and done, I'm going to plug it in there, and before I build the second one up, and I'm going to see how it works. But this is how it came up. Plugged it in there, checked my voltage, didn't start on fire, didn't get electrocuted. That's always a good thing. I built a little, it's an 8 ohm load resistor. It's 100 watts, and I use this on guitar amp, so it's got a 1/4 inch jack on it. So I made this little doohickey thing here so I could plug it into my binding post. So no big deal. Yeah, you definitely cannot turn these things on because the bias will get unstable. So I'm going to plug it into a pair of speakers and see what happens to it. And I did put it up on the scope earlier with a signal generator over to the scope, and at about a volt input I was getting about 40 watts, R squared divided by, I'm sorry, V squared divided by R, and that's peak, so it wasn't RMS. And it was like, okay, it wasn't clipping. I actually brought a little bit above the 1 volt output on the signal generator, and it wasn't clipping or bending over or doing screwy things. I decided, well, that's enough. I didn't want to push it too much. I'll do that with my ears later. So anyway, that's where it's at. I'll bring the second one up once I proof this out to work, and then I'll turn it upside down so you can see what it looks like. So this is what it looks like right side up. Got my Hammond output transformer here. I think it's a 1650 PA is my choke. I used a bigger choke than the author originally called for. I think a lot of folks under-choke their designs. That was kind of my take on it. This is a 375 power transformer. And then I used a standard old cap can to cover some of it. I got two 12AU7s over here, V1, V2. Those happen to be Pavane Horizons that are in there right now. I decided to try some of those out. These are some KT88, some gold lines I have. I've also got a pair of the Pavane KT88s I wanted to try out. Again, I've never used them. And this is my bias V4, V3, and then my center tap for common, and these are the voltage out. So, and I put a little on-off switch. I'll put labels on this later, on-off switch and a pilot light here so I can see what's on. Not that you really need that, but it's just something I typically have done. Again, it kind of goes back to guitar amp build. So that's what it looks like. I'm going to plug it into a pair of speakers and give it the ear test. Well, I plugged it into a set of speakers, and if you're wondering whose those are or what those are mine. I use a motion, air motion transformer on one, and a 1 1/8 inch aluminum tweeter on one side, and I believe that's a 4 inch, and then that's another 6 inch down there on the bottom cab. And then below it separately, and I don't have it on right now, it's I've got a 300 watt Class D subwoofer that I have wired into my preamp kind of as a separate side channel, so they tend to work independently of each other. This cabinet up here is actually a two-way speaker. Sounds pretty darn good considering how I built it and where I built it. So anyway, plugged it in there. It seems to work. I just got it plugged into the radio. I'll let it sit here for a little bit, and I'll crank it up a little bit more, but so far so good. doesn't hum. It's kind of quiet. I'll build a second one up, and next I'll have 2 of these in here and add it to my system and see what goes on from there. So far so good. Well, finished the second amp. Got the board in, got it all wired in, stuff like that. There's the first one over there. It's done, ready to go. I ran that on a pair of speakers yesterday. Sounded pretty good. I had some Gold Lion KT88s that had been burned, and I've had them for years, so they were kind of a nice test set. But yeah, it turned out pretty good. I'm real happy with what it sounded like. This next one I'm gonna set up. I have to plug this thing in and check my voltages across the board just to make sure I didn't do something that I shouldn't have, or forgot something I should have remembered. That happens. I did have some issues when I was setting up the bias yesterday on the first board, which I called build 1. This is build 2, just by luck of the draw, B1, B2. And I had got it backwards, so that when I turned the knobs clockwise it went down, and counterclockwise it went up. So I just had to flip a couple wires over, no big deal. And then I had to adjust to the circuit, coming in with the original designer author had a 55 volt AC tap going into the right here, going into this. This has not been energized, so I can still touch it. Into this rectifier here, which is backwards, and that makes a negative voltage. And so I only have a 50 volt tap off the Hammonds I chose, so I had to adjust the particular resistor right here to get it so that I could have some adjustment there, you know. And so far so good. I ran through. I found this particular application on the computer from Robinette. I'm going to show you in the next segment. It's kind of a cutesy little thing. You can do the calculations yourself to figure out what your cathode current should be for like an EL34 or a KT88. He lists the whole. It's kind of a nice computerized thing. I'm going to show it in the next segment. But anyway, this one here, I'm going to plug it in there and measure my B plus voltages and all my voltages across the plates. Document it. I did it yesterday on the other one, and because I'm using a diode rectification here instead of using a GS34 or 5AR4 tube rectifier, my B plus out of the gate fully loaded is, I don't know, 20 volts higher than the author called for it. So downstream, that put my plate voltages for my KT88s in the 515, 518 range, which I know from a specification standpoint, KT88s can go up to about 800 volts on the plates. I've never seen anybody do that. Typically, people run them around the 450 range, so I'm not that much over. I could easily adjust the plate voltages by swapping out a couple resistors here and here to do that. I'm going to leave them the way they are for right now. I'm not really worried about that being too excessively high. I just have to make sure that when I go to do my calculations for my bias current that I use that plate voltage in my calculations. So I'll show you the Robinette thing that he put online. It's I've seen it before in other places. I just happened to run across his, so we'll take a look at that in the next segment. Okay, this is kind of hard to see, but I'm going to draw on this as close as I can. This is Robinette tube / bias / calculator.htm. And basically you go there and you can put in, and again, I've seen these in other places, you can put in whatever your tube is in here, and then you can put in your plate voltage, and it'll calculate out what your bias should be set to. And when you do the hand calculations, you end up, you know, if you use a, what do they call those things, scouts, you plug in there kind of in the base in between a tube like an EL34 and a guitar amp, and you can measure the plate voltage. Then you do this simple calculation. Again, it all centers on the fact you're coming across a 1 ohm resistor or a 10 ohm, something that is easily divisible so that you know, V equals IR, so that you can read a voltage, and that by virtue of the fact that the R is 1, unity, or 10, so it can be off by a factor of 10. And it just makes it so the two are straightforward. It just, again, it's convenience. And so, anyway, I put the plate voltage in here at, this is just how it comes up when you bring it up. And so I would go down and I would choose out of this drop-down menu. I would choose KT88. I'm going to see if I can do this. And in my case, it is a KT88. Where are you? You're down here somewhere. KT88, 42 watts. There was one that was slower, smaller. Nope. Okay. Yeah, I'll just put it in for right now. It's kind of, yeah, no, here it is, 35 watts. I actually was at a stereo show and I actually saw a KT170, which I've never seen before. It was in the Chicago area this year, the American Expo, thing. It's in Chicago, Schaumburg, actually. And I got to see some really great systems there. Anyway, so you put that in there. In my case, I'm going to put in 518 volts. And then you just click on calculate down here. And it tells you for Class A, B fixed bias, what your bias DC amp should be. And so this is for a cathode bias, cool, average, high, 100%. So, it gives you the range, and that's part of when you do the calculations yourself. You'll put in this 0.85 or 0.95% or unity, 100%, and that you can figure out what if you want to try to hot bias it or cold bias it. So what I had measured yesterday in a fixed bias, I was probably in the, let's see, this one shows 48. I was probably at a half a volt, so I was at 50 milliamps, maybe a little bit higher, which isn't bad, to do. It tends to be a little bit of a cold bias, so I want to drop that down a little bit. I typically had biased other amps at around 48 to 50 milliamps, or in my case it'd be like half a volt or 0.48 volts if you do I've got a 10 ohm resistor in there, so that's kind of how it turns out too. Anyway, this is kind of a nice resource to have. Robin Robinette, a great source for all sorts of stuff. And as you roll through this thing, it's got tube dissipation, a voltage drop. It's got a lot of different information that you can get. Again, Robin Robinette, great source for information. Look them up on the up on the internet, and it's got just a great bunch of stuff up here. You see all these little topics, I remember when I first got into this stuff, and I'm still a novice as far as I'm concerned, how amps work, how tubes work. I read through a bunch of his stuff, and I think one of the first things that he came out and said, which I thought was kind of interesting, not to get real long-winded here, but he said, Ben Franklin was wrong when he said, positive and negative, which way electrons flow. And that, when I read that statement underlined, it all of a sudden made sense, because I'm looking at these schematics going, boy, it seems like things are going backwards. Anyway, good source, Robin Robinette. Well, I've got both of the amps done and connected into my system. And plus or minus, I had a couple of these Gold Lion old tubes. I've had them for, I don't know, 5 years, and I had a couple that were a little bit suspect. Even though I had some test data on them, they were a little bit wonky, so I ended up taking another pair out that I knew to have some better test results, and they really biased well once I brought them up. And then these are the Horizon KT88s, the Pavane ones, which I'm going to buy another pair just to see how that goes. And these 12AU7s are ECC82s. Those are also Pavanes. So, but anyway, this is how it turned out, and it didn't sound too bad. I kind of let it run for 3 or 4 hours yesterday, and it didn't really push it that far. I think I keep a sound meter down here so I can not blow my eardrums out. I think I was 65, 70 dB. And all in all, it sounded really good. And I think these are the speakers I had mentioned before that I had built at one time or another, that for what they are, I built them for a very large room before we moved to the smaller listening room or smaller condo. and they're a lot of speaker for a small room. So getting down to a single pair KT88, even though, you know, the other monoblocks I had, they were, you know, there was 2 pair here, so I was at 125 watts, you know, 60 and 60. You know, just because you double the wattage output, you don't double the volume. I think it's like, I don't know, do the math, it's like a 3 dB increase. It's not much, but a lot more than I want to deal with. And, you know, if you want to double the, how does the math go? If you want to double the volume, you need to have it 100 times the wattage. And so anyway, I just thought it, for simplistic, I would sell the other monoblock amps, and this was kind of hard to, it's expensive to have 2 quads, you know, a quad of KT88s in each monoblock. So again, this is more of a simplistic project for me, and it works. One of the things I did find out in my area, I've got really dirty power here, so I put a power tamer down here, and there's some pluses and minuses with it because you don't get a full wave out of it. So I've read this particular design, it actually helps. You know, this house is just built in with a whole bunch of LEDs, and there's just a nasty 4th and 5th harmonic sitting on top of it, and it does a pretty, this power tamer does a pretty good job of scrapping that out. So anyway, that's how it turned out. Successful project. You know, I keep my expectations low. It didn't start on fire, didn't get electrocuted, and it actually sounds pretty good. I actually put one of these amplifiers on the I have a scope that's good, does the FFT, the fast Fourier transform, and there's a little bit of a fuzz in it that I saw the original author had put a, what do you call, a supplemental capacitor module, and it was a low pass filter, so he was kind of taking away some of this upper little, it's not really, you know, fuzz, it's not really annoying. If anything, I decided not to do that because it wasn't so, I could see it on the scope, and I could see clearly, you know, running the calculations, 1 over 2 pi RC, what he had done there in the configuration, how he laid these things in. It was like, you know, for my all practical purposes, these things sound fine. Plus the fact that at my age, I've got an upper frequency hearing loss anyway, so I guess I can't hear it. So anyway, all that said and done, successful project. I do this for fun, and would hope that you do the same thing.